I did not know that we were going to be talking about my marathons. We're not going to talk about my running times.
I was going to analogize it to what it's like to be an entrepreneur. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But I figured we should start.
I think it's much easier.
We should start with what you've been thinking about lately, some of the ventures and trends you're seeing now.
Yeah, first, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here in London. I love London. This is a beautiful space. So congratulations on your first Startup Grind London event. It's awesome.
Good start.
And thank you guys for coming. So things that I've been thinking about, and we talked a bit about this backstage because it's actually my job in business to think about a lot of things and to be intellectually curious. And sort of one of the most prescient evolutions that I'm following right now, and really still in the middle of formulating a view on, is this evolution we're seeing from lots and lots of apps, so a world where there's an app for everything and everyone's downloading lots of apps, to there being a few very core central apps that have become platforms that are now integrating other products and services extremely tightly into those platforms. And so some really obvious examples include Facebook Messenger and WeChat. On the enterprise side, certainly Slack is in the early but promising stages. And then even things like Snapchat for media. And really sort of this consolidation from having tons and tons of apps to actually bringing them into a few core pillar apps and having those services and those companies touch users through a third party.
Yeah, and we had a chance to dig in this backstage as well, that, say the app boom is over, the rise of Facebook is no longer something to build on, but rather Facebook Messenger is the big thing, Snapchat is the big thing, as apps that come out. So what do you see people building on top of this that you're excited about?
It's a little bit of the early days, but the analogy I'll give is right before the internet, early days of the internet, it was about bringing things that were offline experiences online into a website, right? And that was what everyone was doing in the 1990s. And then the mobile phones came out, platforms started to develop, iOS opened up to third-party developers, and suddenly the evolution was, okay, take those website experiences and optimize them for mobile in the form of an app. And now I think we're at this third stage where it's take those app experiences and now optimize them for messaging and optimize them for a few key core mobile platforms in the context of Facebook Messenger or Slack or Snapchat or what have you. And what does that look like? It's still really early days, but there's clearly a lot of interest and excitement around bots. There's clearly a lot of momentum around conversational UIs. I think the question for me as an investor and for entrepreneurs is how do you retain that connection and that relationship with the end user when you are being built and surfaced to the end user through that third party? And I think that that's going to be really important. And it's hard to build a very significant business when you don't have a direct relationship with your customer. And so people forget in the early days of mobile, when Apple initially opened up the platform to third-party developers to make apps, it took a while for there to be apps that were of any real monetization consequence. That it took a while for really big companies to develop purely based on an app. And now, of course, we live in a world where the largest startup, Uber, has only ever been an app. And so I think that we will see that same sort of migration as it appears through bots and conversational UIs through these messaging apps. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time.
And so the way that Uber was one of the winners and Snapchat was one of the winners of the app economy, it seems like there's maybe going to be winners of, say, the messenger economy, or winners in the sort of conversational UI economy. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of interesting steps in that direction from Google, from Amazon. But what do you see sort of at the forefront, exciting products coming out?
Sure. So, I mean, very early. We're still very early. But take, for example, travel and travel booking. There's a company called Lola. It's relatively new. And they purely exist to help you book travel through these app platforms, through these messaging platforms, I should say. So they don't exist in the context of a website. You're never going to go to www.lolatravel.com or anything like that. They are only ever going to exist within these messaging platforms. And so I think that's interesting. I think it's very early, but I think that that's an interesting space to play in because travel is something that so naturally requires lots of back and forth. People, on average, go to at least 7 websites. They're doing research, so forth. So it lends itself very well to a conversational experience. But then you can take something that, for a long time I think looked like a toy to people, which was Giphy. And Giphy has its own app, and Giphy has actually multiple apps. They have one for searching, they have one for making GIFs, and so forth. They have a website, but where Giphy is really seeing a lot of acceleration is through their integrations with these messaging platforms. So when you go to Facebook Messenger or you go to Twitter, and when you're searching for GIFs and that's them, that has been a huge boon to their overall business. And I think Giphy is a very good example of what communication looks like as it evolves from being purely text-based to interactive.
So instead of email, instead of Slack, we'll be talking in GIFs soon. I'll make sure.
I already am. I don't know about you.
I need more emails from you. We'll see. But then in the actual winners that we're seeing, take a company like, say, Go Butler or a company like Magic. What they did is they rolled out a platform that did anything for you, right? And so did M on Messenger, right? So it seems like there's this kind of go broad, then narrow. So how would founders in the crowd then test out an idea in a space of, say, conversational UI or messaging or bots?
Yeah, I think you have to look carefully about where you first roll out a product or service if you are going to roll out a product or service that is dependent on one of these messaging platforms. Because if you are rolling out to take any of those examples you gave, frankly, like they have every intention of covering all aspects of that conversational experience on the back end on their own team. Facebook messaging has very publicly said, we want third parties to develop for this, and we're going to open up the Facebook messaging platform so that they can. And sort of timely, iMessage had the exact same message earlier this week on Monday from Apple at WWDC. So, the bias there is certainly to build for platforms that are embracing and engaging a developer community.
And something that I wanted to pivot to a little bit here is another platform of sorts, the age-old car in our garage. I wanted to say congrats on a recent acquisition you had.
Thank
Would
you.
love for you to talk about that.
Sure. So Spark Capital, 10-year-old venture capital firm in the United States, we led the Series A of an autonomous technology company for cars called Cruise. They sold in Q1 of this year to GM for $1 billion. I get to take no credit, and I just benefit from the halo. My partner, Nabil Hyatt, led that effort for us. And, it's interesting because people have had cars sitting in their garages now for a century, and maybe a little bit in 2013, people thought about building for cars as a technologist. There was a couple apps that we talked about, Automatic, that was sort of like a Fitbit for your car, and there were some other cute things. But now what we've really seen is that the car is this platform for third parties to develop in the form of autonomous or unmanned driving. And I mentioned to you, last week, even post the Cruise acquisition, post all of the press and sort of conversations about what Uber or Google or Tesla is doing in this space. I was speaking with an iBanker last week who I check in with regularly, and she said that the second that the Cruise news hit, she got a call from basically every industrial who said, I need to meet every single autonomous car technology company you know. And that everyone was clamoring to get some of that technology in-house. And so I think there's still a tremendous amount of appetite from both the industry and, frankly, on the investing side for more technology in that space.
Yeah. And it seems like the common theme amongst all these are timely trends, and they're all very early. So we're early in the days of messaging, we're early in the days of conversational UI, and we're also early in the days of self-driving and car as a platform. So you've obviously done well with Cruise. What other companies are you seeing doing interesting things in the vehicle space?
So there's a company called Otto. It's only very recently been launched. It's a number of Googlers that I worked with who were formerly on the autonomous vehicle team at Google. And they left to go start an autonomous trucking company. And the insight and the realization they had, at least as it relates to US regulation, actually many countries in Europe are much, I think, more advanced about this, particularly France. But the insight that they had was that it's actually much easier to get people comfortable with autonomous trucking than it is autonomous everyday vehicles, because trucks can be programmed to drive at times when people really aren't on the road. So trucks can be programmed to drive from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. or whatnot. By and large, they take straight shots. They go over a highway system that has intentionally been built to be fairly straight, not a lot of traffic. They don't have to deal with the challenge of a child potentially walking across the street, that kind of thing. And what they really have to only man is the end piece on each side of the trucking experience. And so I think auto is an interesting look at autonomous vehicles, but it's not vehicles you or I use. It's actually this massive industry built around trucks.
Another common theme in our conversation so far is that many of these new innovations, whether it is having an AI do a service for you, or it is automating a portion of booking your travel, or it is taking cargo from point A to point B, it seems to be potentially eliminating jobs, or at least changing types of jobs that we'll be doing. So we kind of dug into this a bit briefly, but what does that future of work look like? That's another trend that we seem to be seeing.
Yeah, we spend a lot of our time actually thinking about the future of work at Spark, and have posted a few things about it online. And I think that the context we look at is physical, so it's things like WeWork. What does the office of the future look like? Does everyone actually even need to come in every day? Does everyone want to come in every day? We look at the tools people use to do their work, so not necessarily sort of traditional SaaS, but things like Slack. I mean, there's a generation that just has taken to Slack, and by the way, it's a cross-generation product, but there's a generation that has certainly embraced it like no other because of the analogies to messaging. And then we think about how, in a world where, from a preference standpoint on the generation side, more people are contractors. I don't really love the gig economy phrase, but I guess that's what it is. I'll just say sort of temporary contractors, where people are opting into that lifestyle because it gives them flexibility. It enables them to be intellectually curious, work with lots of different types of people and companies and products. How do you support that worker in a world where historically there's been almost a paternal organization that took care of everything for them? So there's a company in the United States called Even, and they're focused on wage smoothing for all of these sort of contracting type employees who maybe have very spiky paychecks. And so what they do is they monitor the bank account, and then they smooth it out by depositing more into your bank account when it looks like you're maybe not working as many hours as you normally would, and then taking a little bit out when it looks like you've had more projects than normal. So that's an interesting way of creating a product and service that really facilitates and enables this contracting economy, and also sort of provides the type of service that one of these parental organizations like IBM or Xerox or Google has historically done. And I think there's still interesting opportunities to build an insurance in that space. And so forth.
So I appreciate how deep we've been able to go in a short amount of time. We've talked so far about new UI, about building products for things that were otherwise non-tech before, like cars. And we've also dug a little bit into the future of work, both creating it and supporting it. So I want to ask a last question for a brief answer. And having heard all this, what can some of Europe's founders, like the ones in this room, use as resources? What does London have in abundance? What could it still use more of in order to create businesses in these fields?
Yeah, so I've spent a fair amount of time. I actually lived in London up until about a year ago, and I've spent a fair amount of time re-engaging my network this week and meeting with entrepreneurs and just asking them about the ecosystem and the developments they're seeing and the biggest challenges that they have. And ironically, it doesn't sound like capital is an issue. It sounds like money is flowing through the streets. There seems to be no shortage of ideas. The real challenge that I'm hearing from the community is around getting the right people. And I don't necessarily mean people with the right CV or the right skills, but people with the right mentality and attitude around building a startup. Because I think that at the end of the day, startups are a lifestyle. And it's not a particularly pleasant lifestyle most of the time. And so people who are really driven and have a vision of the future that they absolutely believe needs to exist need to build teams around them that have that same sort of drive, and not people who are exchanging sort of the startup lifestyle for the comfortable lifestyle that they've had, at another type of company. It's not a one-for-one. It's a very, very different type of experience.
Cool, thank you. So we're going to potentially take this conversation to Twitter if you have any pushback on that. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us, Megan.